am Weiss. Yeah, I'm there. The first book will be launching will be moderated by Ms. Anita. The second book will be Remaining Education in Pakistan, Contemporary Challenges and Creative Choices by Shahid Siddiqui. And the second launch of second book will be moderated by Mr. Faisal Bari. Oh, so stage is yours, Ms. Anita.
बहुत शुक्रिया कि आपको हैरान हो गया है कि हम टाइम पर शुरू हो रहा है, लेकिन हमारा 2 बुक्स का लॉन्च है और इसलिए हमने सोचा कि we should start now. मेरा नाम है Professor Dr. Anita Weiss, because this panel is all about language, gender, and power. Notice how he said, professor, and you said an Anita. You introduced me just as Anita, but I am Professor Dr. Anita Weiss. Okay, so first of all, it gives me great honor to be the moderator for this amazing book, Language, Gender, and Power, The Politics of Representation and Hegemony in South Asia by Shahid Siddiqui. I will point out that there are books that are for sale. They look like they disappeared. Where are they? Where are the books? They just broke. Oh, at the back desk. There are books for sale if you're so inspired to read them later. I would like to ask you at this time, please, and those of you sitting in the back also, and you all sitting here too, please silence your phones. If anybody here, if your phone goes off, you have to buy Shahid Siddiqui lunch, okay? If your phone goes off. Okay, so now I'm very happy to briefly introduce our other 2 participants. One second. So first we have Baela Raza Jamil. She is the CEO of Idara-e-Talim Aghi, and she's also the founder of the Pakistan Learning Festival and has been involved with a great deal of working for social change for so many years, and social change and public policy for so many years. And then Faisal Bari is a well-known writer. I always read whatever comes in the papers from him and his other work, his professional scholarly work. Right now he is teaching economics and education. And both of them combined are public policy, really, but he's teaching economics and education at LUMS. But finally, our main speaker here, Shahid Siddiqui, he is a leading scholar, linguist, researcher, and academic administrator. He's the Dean of Social Sciences, Media Studies, Art and Design at the Lahore School of Economics. He holds a PhD in Applied Linguistics from the University of Toronto and a Master's in Education in TESOL, teaching English from the University of Manchester, and he's completed postdoctoral research at Oxford. He's a prolific author. His works span educational policy, linguistics, socio-political critique, fiction, travel writing, and multilingual education. For my part, I should briefly introduce myself. I have been a full professor at the University of, I was at the University of Oregon for 36 years, full professor for 20 of those years, and I retired 2 years ago. And, but I'm still doing research, and I come to Pakistan a lot. I've authored 8 books about Pakistan. I'm now working on my 9th. So with that, we have a robust idea for having this discussion. And I'm going to start Well, no, before I start, I want to tell you a little bit about the book. As I see it, there are so many interesting sections in this book about different issues like language, representation, and hegemony. And I'm sorry, I apologize, but I used the example of how a woman was just introduced by her first name. And yet a man, Faisal Bari, who I would say were, in terms of scholarly achievement, pretty similar, but he was introduced as professor. And that happens so much in terms of gender hegemony and gendered power relations. And people don't even think about it when we do that. He also, in the book, it also talks a lot about language and gender construction, how you're fashioning an image of gendered power relations through the use of language, and also how that extends to the larger society. Certainly extends to the family, and then society outside of the family, and of course into every other social realm, looking at economics, political participation, and the like. Of course, it all veers towards education. What are we learning in schools? How are we learning it? What is the expectation we have for what girls can learn, what boys can learn? And I'm very happy to say that in my over 45 years of doing research in Pakistan, yeah, I've gotten old. She remembers me when I was younger, but I have gotten old. But in these over 45 years, I have seen such changes at girls' colleges. Nobody now expects girls to just sit at the side. And the fact, when I did research in the walled city of Lahore in 1987, people said, a widow said to me once, what she was working for her 3 daughters. She was making ponchos, the bottom parts of shalwars, and tirelessly for all 3 girls to get a good education, because she said that gold and land can always be taken away, but nobody can take away a good education. And we're seeing that more. I still get shivers when I say that. We see that more and more all over Pakistan. But the final chapter, the final section is looking at gender discourse, reform, and resistance. And when we think about the layers of gendered patriarchy in Pakistan, we also have to think about these layers of resistance as well as social transformation. So with that, I have a question for Shahid Siddiqui. And my question is, why did you write this book? Really because, you probably don't know who I am, but Anita Weiss, I've been writing on power, gendered power relations in Pakistan, women's economic participation from my professional life. But now, and I see so many changes, but very few of these works have been written by men. Now, yes, he's an esteemed linguist, and this is the domain that we hope that linguists are writing in. But the question is, Siddiqui Saab, why did you write this? And before I turn to your answer, there's a number of people who just joined us. Please silence your phone. That's really important because it just disturbs the whole track that people are thinking about, okay? So please just silence your phone.
Get this book. Yeah. Thanks very much, Anita and Baela and Faisal and everybody. I know it's very difficult to wake up on Saturday and come to Beach Lecture. Thanks very much. This book, Language, Gender and Power, I think this is a very interesting question. What made me write this book? In fact, it goes back to 2004 or 5, I think. I was teaching at LUMS. And my own background is in applied linguistics. And, I thought that language, which used to be considered as something passive and neutral and apolitical, I thought that it's the other way around. Language is not a neutral, passive, and apolitical. On the other hand, it's a highly political, social phenomenon, which is directly linked with politics and power. So I thought that why not design a course, Language, Gender, and Power, that focuses on, these three areas of a triangle, that how gender is constructed with the help of language. So that was the title of my course, which I started teaching at LAMS. And the central point was that language is not a neutral thing. Because in the past, they said that the only function of language is communication. That is it. This course focuses on that the only function of language is not communication. There are two very important functions of language. The first is construction. Language is not just communicates, but it is involved in the construction of social realities. And since it is involved in the construction of social realities, it has a direct link with power and politics. Another very important function of language is perpetuation, that how through language, stereotypes and ideas are perpetuated from one generation to the next generation, from one time to the other times. So that is in the center of this book. And then this idea of gender, which is a social construct, and it is something very fluid. The good thing about gender is that it is changeable. And it changes with time and space. So we try to look at that how language is actually performed in society. And in this book, after the initial few chapters on discourse and the politics of representation, we were looking at that how in sayings and proverbs, women are represented, how in jokes they are represented, rather misrepresented, how in fairy tales, nursery rhymes, movies, films, medias, all these are the medium through which very serious stereotypes are, perpetuated. So, just focusing on this, that language is directly linked with power, and power, not the conservative view of power that is linked with conservative weapons, but power means the ability to make others do things, whatever you want to do, otherwise they won't do. The second layer of power is the ability to make them behave. But here, the conservative weapons, they work. But after this, there are other layers of power. For instance, the ability to make others think the way you would like them to think, otherwise they won't think. The ability to make others feel the way you would like them to feel, otherwise they won't feel like that. The ability to make others see things the way you would like. And here comes the role of culture, literature, and language. So this is how language has become so instrumental, and how, this triangle of language, gender, and power emerged. Yeah, that was the background.
TK, thank you. Again, please silence your phones if you just came in. And now we'll turn to reflections on the book and what Shahid Siddiqui just said with Baela Jamil.
Thank you very much. And again, congratulations to Dr. Shahid Siddiqui, prolific writer, a prolific conversationalist, and every time we've had Shahid Saab at the Pakistan Learning Festival, when he spoke to children, he would speak in the way that you could communicate the issue, taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary. But this is a particularly powerful and relevant book, and I'm glad he comes to it again and again. And I think I think 6 parts of this, including the conclusion, is absolutely important to see how one chapter relates to another. And I would think it's a must-buy for any educator, anyone wanting to understand it. This is not just a marketing pitch that I'm giving, but I think it's so important to understand कि कहाँ से जो ये issue है, इसकी जो परतें हैं या इसके layers हैं, वो कहाँ से खुलते हैं. और I think, Shahid, and the way I've looked and read this book, and it's so important, but I think it all begins at home. The issue of power, politics, actually starts in this particular case, if you look at South Asia, at when you are born and what happens. Because it's that level of social constructions, the language that is used, that really puts girls and women in their place and prepares them for the rest of their life. It's like you are in preparation to become that, typical guni ladki, जिसके पास वो तमाम गुण हैं, जिससे उसको पता चले कि उसके समाज में, घर में, अपने ख़ानदान में क्या उसका काम है और वो वहीं पर रहे. और मैं ये कह रही हूँ अपने एक्सपीरियंस से. अनीता उर्दू बोल लेती हैं और समझती उससे भी ज़्यादा है. तो मैं आई एम जस्ट टेकिंग दैट प्रिविलेज ऑफ स्पीकिंग अ लिटिल बिट इन उर्दू फ्रॉम माई फीलिंग्स, बिकॉज Sasi sitting right here in the front row, I was maybe half her age, and my grandmother, not my grandfather, my grandmother, whom I loved very much, and we reconciled at the end, when she died at 95, she said, "Tum harrafa ho." Now, how would a 4-year-old understand what the word harrafa meant? All I knew was it was very bad. She must have been, because she had a very angry expression, and she said, basically it meant you were an aggressive person. She had labeled me. And then she tried to tame me on everything, on how much food I would take, which parts of the, pot I would use, making sure that the meat was left for the men, the fact that the best halwa of ande ka halwa was also left for the men, all kinds of things that I was being socialized. By the time, and Shahid puts it so graphically, by the time you get ready for life, you then begin to discover, oh my goodness, you are being put down by the laws, you are being put down by the behavior and attitudes in the office. I dare not, for all my years of working with the government, ever wear mehndi, whether it was Eid or whatever, just because I didn't want to hear a comment from someone to say, कुछ भी कह देते ना, जैसे एक दफ़ा कहा, बसंती जोड़े में तो बहुत खूबसूरत लग रही हैं आप. Imagine hearing from any officer, it's so terrible. That put me in my place, how to do. So the plea for socialization begins at when you're very small. But I do want to, for the sake of the audience who's come at 11 o'clock in the morning, share with you 3 important pieces. Look at Amir Khusro from the 13th, 14th century, what he does to women, gorgeous compositions, terrible lyrics at times, and think about it. Then you look at the reformist Deputy Nazir Ahmad, what he does to Akbari and Asghari, the binaries of the good and the bad, and how to put them in place. And then you look at people like Zehra Nigah's poetry, and you understand, okay, what is she trying to do to create that safe flight for women? But coming back to Amir Khusro, and I think this is just by way of entertainment, is to say just the songs of separation of the girls at the time of marriage, or even before that. You are taught again and again. And you have Babul songs. And the Babul songs say, Kahe ko byahi bides re lakhi Babul more kahe को ब्याही विदेश हम तोरे बाबुल खूंटे की गैया हम तोरे बाबुल खूंटे की गैया अरे जिधर हकाओ हक जाए रे लखी बाबुल मोरे. That you, I'm like a cow. Wherever you will send me, I will just go and get hooked wherever you are. And the refrain goes on that to the boys and my brothers you gave a palace or two, and to me it's always Pardes. I go somewhere else. This subjugation, this acceptance, this ability to have female resilience, I hate that word sometimes because it just means you learn to remain in your place and accept it. So by the time we get to textbooks, by the time we get to the other discourse, we need to be able to understand, where does this accumulate from? This is a cumulative language of oppression that begins right from your own home, sometimes from the women themselves, thinking that they're preparing a girl to be guni, preparing a girl to learn to stay in her place, and preparing a girl to see how she has to accept that. And then to have these phrases that Shahid is so well put on how to make sure, tum ladkiyon ki tarah ro rahe ho, ye kya kar rahe ho, to the boys even. Or, and also I remember my friend Shaheen Sardar Ali, when she was a minister in KP, she was told in the cabinet meeting by the governor, हमने आपको तो सिर्फ खातून होने के लिए यहाँ बिठाया था और खूबसूरत भी हैं आप, मगर आप इतनी बोलते क्यों हैं? हमने आपको बोलने के नहीं बुलाया. उसके बाद then she decided to just resign and say, that's it. Here's a professor of law on gender injustice in Islam in Warwick. She's left it to serve her country, only to be told this in 2001. Why are you sitting and talking? This is how it is. Thank you.
Thank
But
you
it's a
very
must.
much, Baela. Bahut shukriya hai. And remember, the main way that this happens, the subjugation, the socialization, is really through language. Language is one of the biggest manifestations of culture. Other things as well, लेकिन सबसे खास बात है language है. तो प्रोफेसर आप फिर कुछ ना कुछ बताइएगा.
So I think Baela's talked set it up very well, that it starts from home. And I think it's very easy to see that. It's Baela mentioned Sasi, my daughter sitting here. And I see that starting very early in the environment she grows, in the school that she goes, even before it's from kindergarten onwards, the distinctions of subjects, colors, what sports are good for women, what sports are good for girls, what for boys, what activities are expected from them, how they are supposed to behave. Everything starts being differentiated on the basis of gender. How a girl sits, how a girl moves, what kind of scrutiny is there on clothing, on other things. All of these create structures that so I've been teaching at a university for a long time now, almost 30 years. And I see it doesn't matter what social or economic group children come from, they have internalized the ways of being so much that it shows in how they learn and then move ahead in life as well. It is very difficult then, by that age, to then question it or even push back against it, because you have normalized it to the extent that it is taken as something that is the fabric of who you are. It becomes a part of the identity. It becomes very hard. And I've seen this differences across peer pressure, how girls feel it as opposed to how boys feel it, in terms of how they want to break into new areas, etc. All of this gets very, very internalized. And as Shahid Saab has brought this out very well, this needs to be thought through in terms of how we move into the future, in terms of how we think through language, how we think through every structure of our thought that we create for our children, and push back and question that right from even our qaida all the way up to our textbooks, etc., that are for college and university. Last thing I'll say, some time ago we had done, myself and my colleague Tayyiba Tamim, we had done a gender discourse analysis of our textbooks, and from grade 1 to 5, and we found that it was just still completely taken over by structures that we have in our thought. बच्ची दिखानी है, कोई खातून दिखानी है, वो घर में दिखानी है, वो काम करते हुए दिखानी है, वो घर का काम करते हुए दिखानी है, बंदा दिखाना है तो वो बाहर का काम कर रहा है, वो सब कुछ और कर रहा है। खातून के ड्रेस पे अब तो इतनी ज़्यादा अकदगन आ गए थे कि दुपट्टे के बगैर कोई बात नहीं हो सकती। इक़दार कुछ हैं, लेकिन उसको इस तरह से बना देना कि वो बिल्कुल आपको हिलने ना दें, वो बहुत मुश्किल। I mean, the funniest was when somebody told me that in one of their great moments, they had a picture of, there was a picture of Newton, which went in one of the textbooks to Punjab textbook board, and Newton was obviously wearing a wig at that time. तो वहाँ से जवाब आया कि ये जो न्यूटन हैं, इनको फ़ौरन दुपट्टा भी पहनाइए, दुपट्टे के बगैर ये तस्वीर नहीं आ सकती। Right? So, I mean, anyway, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Professor Faisal Bari. We have time to have maybe 2 questions, so think about your questions for a minute. I'll have 2 people ask the questions, and then most likely Shahid Siddiqui will respond to them. But who is responsible for changing the slide? Who changes the slide? You do? So now we'd like the second slide to come up as we prepare for the launch of the second book. Okay, does somebody do it? Okay, so I see, so if you could stand up, say who you are, and I see 2 hands, but what we'll do is we'll have both of you make your comments or questions, and then he'll respond. Yes, please stand up.
Thank you for the talk. The question is, you are talking about gender and discourse even. So how do you think that this gender exploitation in terms of, because it is in our discourse, and where from the orientation is coming in a broader structure, that is the superstructure of society. And you know very well where I'm referring to, being in a safe side. So how do you deconstruct the discourse which is part of that superstructure? This is the question.
और आपका नाम क्या है?
Dr. Hussain from Balochistan.
Yeah, Hussain,
Okay.
I think...
Okay, we'll take the second question, and first please identify yourself. Where's that microphone? Just because we were trying to...
Hello, thank you. Hello, I'm Dr. Alex Bellum. I'm a linguist. Thank you. Is that better? There we are, that's better. So I'm Dr. Alex Bellum. I'm a linguist. I work mainly on languages of the Middle East, Arabic dialectology. So I'm interested actually more from a fieldwork perspective, and I wonder whether you've actually begun doing any fieldwork, working on gender with language speech communities of Pakistan in particular, which is something that's quite under-researched. So what I'm interested in is your perspective on being a man working on gender, perhaps in areas of Pakistan, and how easy it is then to access communities, and the advantages of working as a woman perhaps in working on gender and doing sociolinguistic fieldwork. And I wondered if you could comment a little bit on that, because it's quite interesting thinking about the challenges of one's own gender in actually conducting research, is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
I think it's a very interesting question. I'll take the second one first. started teaching this course way back. I think the first edition of this book came out in 2014, long time back. This is second edition. So I looked at, because at that time, the material was imported and there was no book with local data. So I tried to pick, local data, for instance, jokes. I collected jokes from here and looked at how women are represented. Similarly, I collected proverbs and looked at how women are represented. Interestingly, I collected matrimonial ads from India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, and looked at what are the, expected traits for a woman. Similarly, so I think the data used here in this book is all local. And I think that was the first step, and that was the only book at that time. Still, it's the only book that, looks at this nexus of language and gender. As far as the first question is concerned, I think what in the initial pages, I looked at that language is a highly political phenomenon, and it is used to hegemonize and control people. And if you look at the imperialist history, it has been done like that. But the interesting thing is that language is not only used as a tool of control, but it can also be used as a tool of resistance. So the last two chapters, I looked at how we can make resistance, put up resistance through language, and what are the kind of language reforms which are required. So we have to wage this war at two levels, actual social level and at linguistic level at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mary Tudaf say thank you for being here, but don't move. And we don't have to, we had said we were going to move, but we're not. So I hand it over to the new moderator, Professor Fesselbody.
Thank you very much, Anita. So this part is about the launch of Reimagining Education in Pakistan, Contemporary Challenges and Critical Choices, also by Shahid Siddiqui Sahab. With education, everyone knows the education issues in Pakistan are very complicated. We are also not dealing with them very well. People talk about, among other things, 26 million children being out of school, the quality of schooling that most of our children get, even those who are in schools, is pretty poor by and large. The excessive inequality, amazing inequality that we have created between have and have-nots in our school system, which is further entrenching over generations that inequality, and issues of language, issues, a number of domains in which a huge amount of work needs to be done but isn't being done. And in some ways, if everyone thinks that doing more of the same, as in having marginal changes in the policies, doing small increments to what we are doing currently, is going to address the underlying issues, then they're living in a fool's paradise. It's not going to change education that way. We need to have a real rethink about what exactly do we want to do in education and how. We have given up some traditions over time. The last really in-depth look at education came in 1959-60 with the Sharif Commission report. After that, we haven't had that kind of a deep look at education, but it is clearly time to rethink, reimagine education, otherwise our problems will continue. So in that sense, this book is extremely important. Shahid Sahab goes through some of the major issues that we face today in our education system. So education and contemporary discourses, why education, what is education for, education and the needs of the 21st century, and then various components that require deep thinking, education and teaching, state's role in education, language, what do we do with language policy, We've never had a language policy in Pakistan, an explicit language policy. Teachers, obviously, a very, very important part of our any education system is teachers, and then Shahid Saab has a section on higher education as well. So Shahid Saab, let me start by a question very similar to what Anita was asking you before. What made you think that we need to reimagine education, and what are some of the contours of that reimagination that you're thinking of?
Thanks, Faisal. Well, I think I have been associated with education for the last more than 4 decades now. And when I looked at the material written on education, I was surprised that there are not many writings available by Pakistani writers on education. And if there are, they could be, categorized in different categories. Some writings were just a reproduction of the foreign ideas. Some writings were very critical and without any alternatives, solutions. Some writings were, as Faisal was saying, same old questions and same old answers. And there was very little written on education by Pakistani writers from critical perspective. And so I thought that there is a need to approach education from that critical perspective. When I say critical, critical is not criticism. By critical, we mean that, that language should lead to a change at individual level and at societal level. And, education should lead to a change at individual and societal level. And like language, education to me is a highly political phenomenon, which is again linked with power and politics. And one of the writers who really impressed me one of them was Gramsci, who for the very first time in his book Prison Notebooks talked about this idea of hegemony. And he says that there are 2 approaches to control people. One is through political society by using coercion, force, army, police, brutal bureaucracy. And the second approach is through civil society that doesn't use coercion or force. Through culture, through literature, through language, through education, you control others. In the first approach, you control bodies, and in the second approach, you control minds. And according to him, he uses the term spontaneous consent, that by using second approach, the other group which is being conquered, they give consent to you, come and conquer us. You are superior, come and conquer us. So I think it is very important that we who are associated with education as student, as teacher educator, need to realize that this is a highly powerful tool in our hands. As Iqbal says, when he was talking about education and its significance and its power. तालीम के तेज़ाब में डाल इसकी खुदी को, हो जाए मुलायम तो जिधर चाहे इसे फेर. So, through education, you can actually change beliefs and ideas and capture minds. So I thought that there is a need to approach education from this angle, from critical angle. And interestingly, my first book came out in 2007. Its title was Rethinking Education, long time back. And then came other books, Education and Freedom, something like that, a socio-political critique. So it's in continuation with that that we need to raise questions. We need to rethink and reimagine education. Because if I look at this scenario, as Faisal was saying, the whole emphasis is on skills, is on numbers, whether they are literacy rate or out of school children, all that. And we are forgetting the broad, the bigger unit. That is, what is the purpose of education, right? Is the purpose of education, if we look at the functionalist approach, they believe that the purpose of education is conformity, that we educate people to agree upon certain selected set of ideas or values. As Paulo Freire calls it, banking concept of education. That the students are treated as passive recipients, and teacher is just putting knowledge. Or the purpose of education should be to prepare students to raise questions, and the graduates should not be just going to the society to fit into the slots of jobs, but also they should be thinking citizens, and they should be concerned about what is happening in society, and they should be brave enough to stand up to challenge the taboos of society as well. Thank you.
Baela, if I may, continuing from what Shahid Sahib was saying, Shahid Sahib is giving a concept of education that is, real education in some ways. But at the same time, what we see is कि हमारा हर वक्त emphasis ये होता है कि बच्चों को क्लास में कैसे ले आना है, उनको वो कायदा बेसिक्स जो हैं वो कैसे सिखाने हैं. जब क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग वगैरह की बात आती है वो तो काफ़ी दूर मुश्किल लग रही है फ़िलहाल, और ये सिर्फ स्कूल में नहीं, हायर एजुकेशन में भी है. आप बहुत सारी एफ़र्ट्स में जो करिकुलम की किताबों की थी और जो आप एक्चुअली टीचिंग की है उसमें इन्वॉल्व रही हैं. How do you see this aspect? Is it possible to really introduce ideas of critical education, not critique, but critical education in Pakistani education system, private and public, as it stands today?
I have two takes on that. And I think it's very important for us to see that we as a nation have suffered multiple layers of very oppressive systems of learning. And actually some of that begins, I'm not trying to glorify pre-company days and pre-colonial days of education, but the point is that उस ज़माने में कोई authentic learning थी, of little learning, but maybe authentic learning. But the colonial, of course, अमीर खुसरो की भी उन्हें बात की है, वो एक और सिलसिला चल रहा था. But the colonial project of education was a very specific one. Its time, it was to displace what was existing and then to create something which was fitting the agenda of the company and then the colonial rule. Comes 1947 and we became lazy. We never sat down to design an education system कि जो कहता है कि अच्छा अगर पाकिस्तान को यहाँ पहुँचना है तो करना क्या चाहिए. तो वो critical जहन था ही नहीं और वो उसी तरह से हमने पैचवर्क करते रहे. Now that is now sort of bankrupt to its core. उसके रिजल्ट्स नहीं सामने आते. सामने हमारे पास एक बहुत मलेज है सिस्टम में. तो जाहिर है एक तो एस्पेक्ट ये है, we carry this baggage of layers of, I think, defunct education systems which don't work anymore. They work very well actually for the colony. They wanted people to learn how to do revenue, how to make count better, how to be able to give, to produce more from the land, canals बने, फलां बना, वगैरह वगैरह. मगर हमने कुछ बैठ के उस पर authentic काम नहीं किया. शाहिद साहब की किताब एक ऐसी है कि जो कह रही है, लोगों को उकसा रही है, let's do some authentic work. But एक और पीस जो है वो है न्यूरो साइंसेस से आ रहा है और ये जो टेक्नोलॉजी की एक्सप्लोजन से आ रहा है, यानी कि AI है, सब कुछ है. न्यूरो साइंस ये कहती है कि पहले जो हमारा मफरूज़ा था that actually a child cannot do abstract thinking, cannot do critical thinking, cannot look at aspects of social emotional learning. वो तो, you know, even my professors, I mean, people whom I thought were constructivists and were teaching us what is pre-operational, operational, pre-abstract, abstract, said कि वो तो linear तरीके से बहुत देर में आता है. Till we discovered neurosciences, and they continue to inform us that actually 90% of the brain is done by age 5, and in fact there's a lot of critical thinking taking place. Now that means, if that is so, then this notion of critical thinking cannot be introduced to children in early years is ridiculous. So we have to literally completely revamp that paradigm that came from the West, that was then further reinforced here and came from the colonial project of education, and go back to something that, not go back, but go forward to something which is looking at the process of learning and the process of critical thinking. अब हम कहते हैं social emotional learning, which is critical thinking, which gives you executive function, agency, etc. That has to begin very early. In fact, the children are ready for it, but we are not ready. The teachers are not ready. They are dumbing down children. Similarly, I think, for example, from Shahid's own book, कि एक बच्चा स्वात में बैठा है, उसको पश्तो आती है really well, but has now the ability to be able to translate anything from anywhere in a minute, to be able to understand better. Now that agency is coming to children who are even in grade 6 and 7 and asking, कि, you know, हमें तो machine engineering करनी है, हमें तो सब कुछ करना है, and they mean it. और अगर टीचर उनको क्वेश्चन करे कि तुम्हें क्या पता है इसके बारे में, तो कहते हैं देख लीजिए, हमने तो 2 कोर्सेज कर भी लिए ऑनलाइन, देखिए हम तो स्पेनिश सीख रहे हैं ऑनलाइन, देखिए हम तो अमेरिकन सीख रहे हैं with American accent. Kids are way, so the project of education, Shahid and Faisal, it is very important कि this needs some authentic pieces of work. मैं शाहिद को कह रही थी, we need बैठक्स now of education seriously to put this together in a way that addresses not just what he's saying here, but also from his other book as well. Or, so now we have those bits and pieces to do some authentic work on this, in this area. And finally, I come from a house of musicologists and musicians. जब मैंने देखा उनको कि वहाँ पे तो, because हमारे South Asia में music is, classical music is not written. So you have to produce authentic music. So you are given the basic lexicon of what microtones are, श्रुति क्या होती है, राग क्या होते हैं, emotions के साथ वो कैसे चलते हैं, दिन में कौन सा वाला करना है, and the musician has to come with that authentic piece of music, whether it's दरबारी or whether it's मालकोस, मगर वो आपका बनेगा, वो किसी का copycat नहीं होगा, copycat होगा तो कहेंगे बेकार का है. So there have been evidences of some very authentic stuff, maybe crafts may be हैं, but we are not looking at those areas, genres of learning.
Thank you.
That is a learning.
Thank you. Professor Weiss?
Yes, hi. If you walked in late and you said, who's this foreigner here? I'm Professor Dr. Anita Weiss, and I, as a professor who's been coming to Pakistan for 45 years, there's many things I could talk about in education here, especially my engagement with higher education, but we don't have that much time. But there's one thing I want to focus on. And in fact, I have a whole chapter on this in my last book, Countering Violent Extremism in Pakistan, Local Actions, Local Voices, which was published by Oxford University Press. It should still be for sale here. But what I want to focus on is this whole idea of reimagining education in Pakistan, because when you are living under such harsh conditions, there are sometimes you must reimagine education. So what I looked at was 2 kinds of school systems that are reimagining education. The Bacha Khan school system in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the Zoya Science schools in southern Punjab. These are 2 of the areas of Pakistan that have been hardest hit by extremism. These are 2 areas where both systems are talking about critical thinking, how can we have our children embrace critical thinking and not rote memorization? And also, how can you imbue in them a sense that you are part of Pakistan, that you can make a contribution to Pakistan? So in the light of contemporary challenges, these are necessary creative solutions that have come out. I was privileged to watch a play put on by children outside of Muzaffargarh in southern Punjab. And the children, I mean, it was like a regular day. They were going to school, and one boy chose to stay home with his father to help do something in the store. And then there was a bomb blast. The boy died, the father died, and the children went on with their lives because they've learned that they have to. But later on, I was invited to talk with the children about what the play meant to them. And they were so astute. They knew what was going on in the country. And when I talked to older children, both in Zoya Science Schools and in the Bacha Khan schools, I was very impressed by their determination that with their lives, they wanted to help build a better Pakistan. And I have hardly heard that feedback at any schools in Pakistan. It's usually you want a better life for yourself. But in both types of systems, they've imbued this idea out of necessity of how you reimagine education and get students, very poor students in both systems, to see themselves as viable members of Pakistan society. And so with that, please.
Thank you very much. We'll do the same thing, take 2 questions. I mean, I just have to say this before going. So it's very common, everyone talks about critical thinking honi chahiye, critical thinking honi chahiye. चाहते हम ये हैं कि भाई critical thinking physics maths में हो जाए, पर बाकी चीज़ें जब आती हैं ज़िंदगी की और बाकी तो उसमें switch हम off कर दें, वहाँ critical thinking ना हो. ये कोई दवाई थोड़ी है कि 2 घंटे के लिए चलेगी उसके बाद नहीं होगा. It's a way of being. It's how you create your identity and how you create yourself in some ways. Right? अगर उतने deep project पे जाएंगे फिर उसके साथ जो बाकी changes आने हैं उसके लिए भी तैयार होना पड़ेगा. उसके लिए पता नहीं हम तैयार हैं या नहीं. So 2 सवाल हम लेंगे जी, इकट्ठे ले लेंगे और उसके बाद फिर शाहिद साहब से most likely शाहिद साहब से जवाब देगा. जी मैडम आप पीछे जी 1 सेकंड दीजिएगा, आपके पास भी आ जाते हैं. जी जनाब प्लीज़ आप अपना नाम बता दीजिएगा और फिर सवाल.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Mehek Ijaz. I'm just going to combine the question with both of these books because language is connected with education. So the question that always I am very much confused about the fact that the medium of education should be in which language. So just I want to ask this main question that because when I have moved from Lahore to Karachi and my kids, they have to study Sindhi as well in this school. As a Punjabi, I thought why they are studying this. And when we go abroad, kids are studying Chinese and like that language is must in German language and all. So the main question is that what do you think as an educationist, because we think in our own language, like generally we people know 3 languages, our own language.
सवाल आ गया medium of instruction
medium
पे
of instruction
बिल्कुल
क्या
शाहिद
होना
साहब से
चाहिए, what should be the
जी बिल्कुल ठीक.
main medium.
जी सर.
मेरा बिल्कुल मुख्तसर कमेंट है. आपने फरमाया ना कि यहाँ फिज़िक्स केमिस्ट्री में तो क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग अलाउड है, बाकी सब्जेक्ट्स में नहीं है. लेकिन मेरी जान के मुताबिक तो फिज़िक्स में भी नहीं. यूनिवर्सिटी सतह पे शागिर्द आज भी कहते हैं कि ज़मीन स्टैटिक है और सूरज घूम रहा है यूनिवर्सिटी सतह पर.
ठीक है जी,
बस ये मुझे कहना था.
पीछे दे दीजिए.
हेलो
जी.
मैं आई एग्री विद फैसल बारी कि जहाँ पे theoretically talking about critical thinking, that is fine. But what is actually happening in society? I think as a teacher, I feel, because मैं तो री इमेजिनिंग की बात ही नहीं कर रहा हूँ, मैं अभी तक एजुकेशन में फंसा हुआ हूँ, टू एजुकेट समवन। री इमेजिनिंग तो दूर की बात है। क्या हम एजुकेट कर रहे हैं? आर वी एजुकेटिंग? आर वी आर देयर इज अ इंडोक्ट्रिनेशन? आई फील देयर इज अ इंडोक्ट्रिनेशन इन टर्म्स ऑफ ईमान, इन टर्म्स ऑफ गैरत, इन टर्म्स ऑफ मोहब्बे वतन। हम सारे डोजेस दे रहे हैं बच्चों को।
बिल्कुल
डू
ठीक
यू
हो
थिंक
गया।
वी आर एजुकेटिंग?
सो डॉक्टर साहब, शायद साहब, 2 सवाल, एक मीडियम ऑफ इंस्ट्रक्शन पे और दूसरा कि तालीम दी नहीं जा रही तो री इमेजिन कैसे करना है। बाकी लोगों से बड़ी माजरत, हमारे पास सिर्फ 3 मिनट हैं, अगर शाहिद साहब का जवाब सुन लीजिए तो उसके बाद वी हैव टू कंक्लूड। जी शाहिद साहब।
जी, मीडियम ऑफ इंस्ट्रक्शन आई थिंक वो 3 मिनट में तो नहीं, मेरा ख्याल है 3 दिन लग जाएंगे, लेकिन वेरी क्विकली आई थिंक इट्स वेरी इजी टू से जी कि हमारी अपनी ज़बान में होना चाहिए। जो आर्गूमेंट दिया जाता है कि चाइना में भी ये हो रहा है, फ्रांस में भी ये हो रहा है, बाकी जगहों पे हो रहा है, हमारे यहाँ क्यों नहीं हो रहा? तो आई थिंक थ्योरेटिकली आई एग्री अपने ज़ुबान में होना चाहिए, बट देयर इज़ अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कंडीशन कि क्या जो चाइना में हो रहा है वो हम अपनी उर्दू के साथ कर रहे हैं? दे हैव बीन स्ट्रेंथनिंग देयर लैंग्वेज विद द हेल्प ऑफ ट्रांसलेशन एट मैस स्केल, कि जितनी बुक्स आ रही हैं इंग्लिश में और वो फिक्शन नॉन फिक्शन, दे आर बीइंग ट्रांसलेटेड एट स्टेट लेवल इन फ्रांस, इन टर्की, इन ईरान। पाकिस्तान में अपनी लैंग्वेज को, उर्दू को, सवाए स्लोगन्स के कुछ नहीं दिया। हमने 1959 की रिपोर्ट में कहा कि 15 साल में हम इसको सेंटर में ले आएंगे। उसके बाद 73 के कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में कहा कि जी अब 15 साल पे हम ले आएंगे। कुछ सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा। सो आई थिंक इफ दैट इज़ द काइंड ऑफ लैंग्वेज जो हमारे पास अब है, ये वी कैन नॉट इक्वेट इट टू द फ्रेंच एंड चाइनीज़ लैंग्वेज। सो एक पॉलिटिकल स्लोगन तो है हम अपनी ज़बान में करें, लेकिन उसके लिए कंडीशन ये है कि अपनी ज़बान को स्ट्रेंथन करना होगा। जो आपका क्वेश्चन है कि, बल्कि आपका और फैसल का भी, कि इकबाल के जब रिकन्स्ट्रक्शन ऑफ रिलीजियस थॉट इन इस्लाम, तो वो बड़े इंटरेस्टिंग वो डिवाइड करते हैं कि ये जो इल्म है नेचुरल साइंसेस को इसेस के ये है, लेकिन जो सोशल साइंसेस हैं उनके लिए वो नाम देते हैं इश्क। और वो कहते हैं कि ज़रूरी है कि ये दोनों कंबाइन हों। ऐसा नहीं है कि सिर्फ वो एक नेचुरल साइंसेस की रीज़न हो, इश्क ना हो। सो आई थिंक इट्स वेरी इम्पॉर्टेंट कि एक जब हम री इमेजिनिंग एक प्रोडक्ट की बात करते हैं, किस तरह की प्रोडक्ट हमारे सामने आए, तो उसमें रीज़न भी हो, उसमें वो फीलिंग्स भी हो, उसमें एक प्रैक्टिकल विजडम भी हो। और वो जो आपने क्वेश्चन किया वो बेसिकली यही क्वेश्चन है, आपने लफ्ज़ दूसरे किए कि ये जो एजुकेट कर रहे हैं, हम यही कह रहे हैं कि वो एजुकेट नहीं कर रहे हैं। एंड देयर इज़ अ नीड टू री इमेजिन व्हाट वी हैव बीन डूइंग। थैंक यू।
आप सबका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। मेहमान किताबें पीछे मौजूद हैं, अगर आप किताब ख़रीदना चाहते हैं तो वो पिछले टेबल पे मौजूद है, प्लीज़ ज़रूर लीजिएगा। बहुत शुक्रिया आपका।
And guys, we did, it is now 11:59.
Yes.
Congrats to us.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to be taken up. It was a pleasure meeting you. Well,